Hello, I'm Carl Natural and this is Teletext People. Teletext People is a podcast that focuses on the history of teletext, the people who made it tick, the people who worked at the teletext services, and now the people that keep the teletext medium going long after its switch off in Great Britain in 2012. Paul Rose is one of the UK's most experienced writers for film and television, and for over 20 years he's been writing scripts for film and TV. As one of the UK's leading writers of children's TV, he was co-creator and lead writer for Almost Never, The 4 O'Clock Club, Danny's House and Danny's Castle for children's BBC, and he's also written extensively for adults including Sky One Stella and EastEnders. He's been nominated for BAFTA 3 times, including for Best Writer at the 2017 BAFTA Children's Award, and won a Sony Academy Award for his work on the Christian O'Connell Breakfast Show. In a previous life, writing under the name of Mr Biffo, he was one of the UK's top video game journalists, editing the legendary Teletext video games Digitiser. Paul was kind enough to spare me some time to tell me all about his teletext career, and first of all, I started by asking Paul what his first recollections of teletext were.
There's a difference between what actually was my first and my first memory of it, because I don't remember discovering it for the first time. I don't remember when we first got a teletext TV or anything like that, but I first remember using it mainly for the teen pages with Oracle back in the sort of mid to late 80s. I didn't really use it until I think I had some friends that I used to regularly do role playing with. We used to play sort of Dungeons and Dragons and all that, and we kind of started, I guess, egging each other on those pages, which was, what was it called? Was it called Buzz? I think the teen pages on Oracle, something like that. And we used to egg each other on to ring up this hotline that they had where you could leave a message on an answering machine. And I think one of them had done it and got a message on air. And so then, of course, we all were like, oh, that's awesome. Look, we got our name in print on the TV. And I think that, as I remember, it was the first time I started using teletext, was to ring up Oracle's teen pages hotline, leave stupid messages on an answer machine, and then see if the next day if they got on. And lo and behold, I did get a few on air. Weirdly, the guy that who used to run those pages, Gareth Herrinks, ended up working at Teletext. I think we're friends on Twitter now, and so that was it really. And I got hooked from that. And started using it, I guess, sort of regularly. And of course, because as I was, back when I was a teenager, I loved to sort of draw, and I was interested in kind of computer art and all the rest of it. I was fascinated with the cartoons that were on there. So you had like Barney's Bunch. I was always really impressed with 40 by God, what's his name? The guy that did 40 the dog. That fella, Swerve, Ian Irving, and that's him, Swerve. That was what he always signed it by, and because his style was my style that I would eventually gravitate towards, was much more sort of influenced by Barney's Bunch, because sort of big, which was about Badger, but sort of big, kind of bold characters and sort of clever use of the sort of all the different features, but Ian's 40 the dog on the Foretell service was really clean and kind of almost sort of geometric, but he would pack so much story into a single page of teletext, and I was always fascinated by that, how he managed to do it. So I just used to browse it, and then the next sort of big watershed moment that I remember using teletext was when the Iraq War happened, the first Gulf War, And I remember waking up sort of one early morning. My daughter wasn't very old, and I woke up to give her her feed in the night and put the Teletext news pages on. And I remember the headline reading, "The liberation of Kuwait has begun," and thinking, "Oh shit, that's it. This is this is World War Three." You know, I've just got a new baby daughter in my arms, literally right now, and what sort of world am I bringing her into? And I just remember that so clearly, sort of middle of the night, and seeing this really sort of stark headline. So yeah, they were the sort of big moments that I remember really. And I don't, like most people back in the 80s, it was Teletext was sort of magic to me and kind of alchemy. It felt so futuristic, kind of having computer text on my TV, and not only that, but I could interact with it by pressing reveal, and that in itself felt oh wow, I'm interfacing with the machine here. It was to our generation, it was just, I don't know, it was the first time you see it was just sort of mind blowing really. You didn't need a BBC Model B to display these amazing graphics such as they were, but and then weirdly I actually had, partly because I was so hooked on these teen pages and the music pages, that I actually had an ambition to write a Teletext magazine. And I thought, how cool would that be? They're daily, or you can update it in real time, and people write into you or leave messages on an answer machine and all that, and that seemed really cool. So lo and behold, something like that did actually happen.
So yeah, how did you end up actually working for the computer in your front room?
Well, I was working at Ladbrokes Racing as their graphic designer, and I started there. I'm really young. It was my first job out of school. I dropped out of college, so I never finished my A-levels, and I got a job at Ladbrokes Racing because my cousin worked there and said to me, "Oh, they're looking for a graphic designer," and she said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, wow, that sounds amazing, doing kind of computer art or whatever the hell it was." I didn't understand fully what the job was, and so she went to them and said, "My cousin's a really good drawer. Can he have an interview?" So I just went in with all these drawings that I'd done, and they sat me down at a computer, and the system they had, it was called LES, which stood for Ladbrokes Electronic Service, I believe. And it wasn't Teletext, but it wasn't far off. It was slightly more complex than Teletext. It had sort of slightly higher resolution. It had all these sort of custom characters. So you didn't just have the standard kind of Teletext, 6-pixel block. There were sort of custom characters like sort of diagonal shapes, and you could mix colors. You could mix yellow and red to get orange, but you could only do that in a solid block of color. And so they got me playing around with that, and then I got the job there. And then of course Ladbrokes had pages on Oracle as it was back then, and it was sort of only really a matter of time that I then had to start providing graphics for Oracle, or the Teletext, the Ladbrokes Oracle pages. Now, I remember I went to Oracle's head office, and they sort of showed me how it was sort of run there, and someone gave me a quick rundown of the way it worked. And so that's where I learned how to do Teletext graphics. Then from Ladbrokes, I went to work on the Wembley Stadium scoreboard, which was it wasn't that different to Teletext in that it was all pixels again, very large pixels, literally kind of pixels, were the pixels on the scoreboard were literally just light bulbs. It was bizarre when one of the things we had to do as part of the job was to go up and change the pixels, which was literally you had to go to the top of Wembley Stadium, walk across this really narrow gangplank that was about 150 feet off the ground, I mean, like literally, this thing was a plank. Imagine you walk a plank kind of off the side of a pirate ship. It was that narrow, with a really flimsy kind of handrail, and then you go into the scoreboard itself, and you had to identify which light bulb had gone out, which pixel was dead, and then reach round and literally just unscrew it and screw a new one back in. So it was like kind of physical teletext in a way. So sort of, again, still sort of staying in that same sort of genre of kind of very low resolution graphics became, I guess, my stock in trade. And then I worked there for a while, doing animations that said goal and, all these sorts of bizarre things, and literally scoring kind of football matches. We would have to sit there and put in a score when someone scored, which was ridiculous because we couldn't actually see the pitch where our scoreboard office was. So we knew when a goal was scored because we'd hear the audience kind of roar. And then we used to have Sky Sports on, and they would register the goal kind of, about 3, 4, 5 seconds after the audience erupted, and then we'd just get the score off of Sky Sports. It was ridiculous. We didn't have any clue who scored at any point. We were getting it off the telly. So from there, then I got a call from someone that I worked with at Ladbrokes, whose flatmate was working for Teletext, which had obviously landed the Teletext franchise from Oracle, and they were looking for a graphic designer, and I went and had a job interview, and that was it really. And I ended up being, I think, initially the only member of staff on an ongoing contract. Everyone else was on kind of short-term contracts, and I, such is the arrogance of youth, or rather, I think more in my case, the ignorance of youth, that they told me they were going to give me like a 3-month contract or 6-month contract, and I said no, I don't want that. And they said okay. I went and they said, can you wait outside a minute? And I waited outside it was the editor and Graham Lovelace, who at the time was the deputy editor. And then they called me back in 5 minutes later and said, okay, we'll give you an ongoing contract. And I was the only person there with any kind of job security, because no one knew whether Teletext was going to fail or not. But anyway. So that was it really. And then I was doing graphics at Teletext for in the run up to the launch. And I mean, this is a story I've told many times on many different podcasts, probably when you and I have chatted before, Carl. And what happened was they asked everyone, can you think of any sort of sections that were missing on the service? And I pitched the idea of a video games page, which they currently then weren't doing, or they had a single page, and I suggested a magazine, this being 1992 going into 93, when Sonic the Hedgehog was at his height, and Sega and Nintendo were all over the media, and John Holmes, the then editor, said, all right, well, you can write it then with this chap that was writing for the team pages called Tim Moore. And so I ended up juggling doing the graphics for Teletext with writing the video game magazine, which we called Digitiser, which some people may have heard of, he says ominously.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people that do fondly remember Digitiser, and there's plenty of pages that have been recovered. I know that you'd never admit it yourself, but testimony to how good the pixel art can be on such a restricted format, where you can get some of your famous characters, sort of represented in like an 8x8 grid of sixels.
Yeah, I mean, some of those I look back on now. Even I'm sort of surprised how well they work. There's a graphic out there of the Beatles that I drew of the Beatles, the 4 Beatles, and they're tiny little graphics, but somehow you know who they are. They've only, it's the hair, it's the eyes, shape of the face, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the Beatles. And it's weird how Teletext can be used in that way to sort of almost, it's about sort of the absence, it's about the space between the pixels as much as anything, and using kind of sort of black space or an absence of graphics to sort of suggest things, and how the brain fills in the gaps. You just have to kind of give the brain enough information, providing it's a familiar enough thing. Like I did another one, I think, of various Doctor Who's. Again, very, very tiny graphics, just sort of little icons. But I think because we're so familiar with them, that the brain does a huge chunk of the work. But, it became... Digitiser was a sort of very visual section. It was probably the most visual section on Teletext because I was working on it. So we always had these characters and these pages with huge graphics and things which no one else got. Everyone else would kind of come up to me and go, "Oh, quick, I need a icon of a palm tree," which is the classic, or a pelican or something like that. And I'd knock that out and they'd stick that in the corner of their page. Whereas on Digitiser would have these huge images of things with like tentacles coming out of their mouths and footballs for eyes and things. So I just went to town with it.
Yeah, and one of the main characters would be Turner the Worm.
Well, yeah, he was on the kids section. That was again something that I pitched at the same time that I pitched Digitiser to the editor. In fact, I don't even think I pitched it. I just did one day and said, "What about this?" Because I'd loved Forty the dog and Barney's Bunch. And Teletext didn't have a comic strip at the time, so again they just said, "All right, yeah, you do that." There wasn't even any discussion about it. They just said, "Okay, we'll stick that on that page." There wasn't a big deal. I loved doing Turner, but they were really time consuming, those full page graphics, which, and I used to write the stories as well, and I used to write them really dependent on what I fancied drawing. So we did time travel and post-apocalyptic stories and going to other planets and dinosaurs and things, just because I'll be like, "Oh, I want to have a go at a Teletext dinosaur, I want to have a go at a Teletext hellscape fallen city or something like that." But I don't know how the audience ever kind of put up with it, because it wasn't daily, it was weekly. So there was no momentum whatsoever, but people remember it.
Yeah, and so the stories that you had, were they sort of like back from your days of Dungeons and Dragons and all that? Were they stories that were rekindled from the past, or were they very much of the moment?
I just made them up as I went along. I mean, they were. It was quite sort of sci-fi, Turn of the Worm. Quite a few of those have been recovered now, and there's some good gags in them. There were a lot of sort of parodies of things, like parodies of the X-Files and Doctor Who and Jurassic Park and stuff. And I'd normally start from that point of view, and then we'd always have a Christmas episode. I love doing the Christmas episodes, or the Christmas storylines, which would always end exactly the same way, where it was Turn the Worm and his friend Glug the Slug. There'd be a knock at the door at the end, and Terry Turkey would turn up. Oh no, they'd always end up spoiling their Christmas dinner somehow, and then they'd get a knock at the door from Terry Turkey, and the last shot of them would be Turner and Glug eating Terry Turkey. No one ever complained. I mean, it was it was really macabre.
That's amazing. So with Digitiser and Turner the Worm, what was a typical day like working at Teletext?
The big trouble was, for me, Teletext graphics didn't take me very long, which is why the bulk of my day would be taken up with Digitiser, with someone occasionally coming across to me and saying, I need a graphic for this or graphic for that, and I'll do that, bash it out in 5 minutes, send it across to them on the internal messaging system, and then carry on with writing game reviews and messing about with Tim Moore, really. But it sort of shows you that because eventually I started doing Digitiser from home full time, effectively from home myself, without doing the graphics as well. And when that happened, I was able to finish my day's work in an hour, which shows you sort of how much of my day was taken up with just messing around with Tim, because there was not a lot to do. Because we had to play the games, we had to kind of go out and do research articles or whatever, or do interviews or kind of reports on places, but you might do one of those a week or once a fortnight or something like that. And we always pretty much, we had this kind of rule of getting Christmas done really early, so we would get everything done in December before the end of November every year, and then have nothing to do. I mean, I really sound lazy, but it didn't feel lazy at the time. It was a lot of fun, but maybe too much fun.
So, speaking of too much fun, were there any junkets or anything that you had to go on at the time for? Because Digitiser was held in quite high regard when that came to reviewing games. Some people took it very seriously indeed.
Well, yeah, it might have been held in high regard with certain sections of the gaming, but not necessarily within the games industry. But we did kind of get ourselves invited to things begrudgingly by most people, and we were friends as well with Violet Berlin, who was a big Digitiser fan, and kind of forced her friendship upon us. Not that we ever regretted it, because she's lovely and she's one of my oldest friends now, but she used to get us invited to things. We basically sort of surfed through the 90s games industry on her coattails. So we went to, so many. I remember there was a big Nintendo party in Hammersmith. The first one we went to was the Sonic 2 launch at Hamleys in London, which was, for me, it was like a whole new world. Because, I was at a party full of all these celebs. They'd open Hamleys especially for us, red carpets and things. It was bizarre. Most of these things we used to just, make the most of it. We were men in their 20s, kind of being offered free beer and goodie bags and, surrounded by celebrities and the like. So, we used to take it in turns to stroke celebrities' backs. We had this game where you had to make the celebrity turn round by stroking their back, but not get caught. That was a lot of fun. I remember doing it to... Who did I do it to? I remember doing it to Tony Robinson. Did it to Tucker Jenkins, Todd Carty, Right Said Fred. We dropped a whoopee cushion on John Leslie's head from a balcony. Yeah, anyway, sorry, I digress.
It's your it's fine, mate. With your time at Digitiser, when was the direction of travel sort of changing for Teletext? When did you get an inclination that that things were going to change with Teletext at any time at all?
Yeah, obviously the internet. It was fairly early on. I remember the moment we had a hookup with Future Publishing, who used to give away. We used to give away subscriptions to their magazines for like a letter of the week in our weekly hot topic on our letters page. And I remember the guy who was the publisher of Future, was the top guy, came in. And I remember him saying to us, "You guys need to get on the internet. It's going to be big." This shows how long ago it was. And we had in the office one computer that could access the internet. And we occasionally went in there and tried to sort of get on a bulletin board, and but it was really slow. And then gradually, the whole office got online. I remember playing some multi-user dungeon role-playing game on there when I was meant to be working during office hours. Research, exactly. And the big changes came, I guess, when Teletext launched its website. and they sent me off to sort of learn HTML and Photoshop and all of that. And I was sort of helped set that up and design all the pages for that. But that was the time, because and it felt, probably quite rightly, that certain people within the company felt that, as you say, that was the direction of travel, that Teletext was already starting to be sort of superseded by this new thing. But I think, as history has kind of proven, Teletext perhaps didn't move fast enough, or the people who were involved didn't stay at the company, moved elsewhere, and those left behind, didn't have the same sort of clarity of the future. So that was it really. But weirdly, even when they had their website, it sort of felt a bit like an afterthought to me. We didn't put as much into the Digitiser pages on the website as we did on Digitiser on Teletext, because Digitiser on Teletext at its height was getting 1.5 million views a week, and compared to, I don't know what, 20,000 or something on the website. But it's a chicken and egg thing. Maybe if we'd concentrated a bit more on the website version, then maybe we'd have got more eyes on it. But I don't know, it was a bit of an afterthought.
I always think that the TV that you're viewing Teletext on is also the TV that you plug in the Mega Drive into.
Yes.
With the PC, it's very much it's its own sort of like self-contained thing, isn't it? You only use it to go on the internet. So, what would you really be looking at news and things like that? You'd be like, doing gaming and not really looking at other things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think back then, it was, at least when Teletext started their website, it was still kind of very much a curiosity. I mean, I do remember, I think we had our launch, or the launch of it, or we went out for dinner or something. I remember going to a cyber cafe, remember those? But I don't know, it still didn't feel like it was, because not everyone had PCs back then. It wasn't the time when everyone had a laptop, everyone had a phone that they could get online. So I guess perhaps I didn't, have the vision that some people did. I didn't sort of kind of think, well, this is going to be for everyone. This is just going to be for kind of nerds, which, is stupid of me, given that, Digi was for sort of nerds and gamers and the exact same people who would drive the internet to what it became. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it was that. There were no smartphones and things, so the internet wasn't universal like it is today.
Yeah. So, what was? I guess we're going to come and ask you about the final days of Digitiser now. Was there are some particular bits of artwork there that do sort of live in legend? Would you be able to elaborate on them in any way?
Could you possibly be meaning the real turn of the worm? Yes, that's going to be on my headstone when I die, I swear to God. Get it banned from the cemetery.
So what was the story around that? Was there, were you trying to slip sort of subtle things past other people doing QC on your site or something? Was that the?
Well, I mean, on Digi always was kind of a bit near the knuckle anyway. I mean, it was early on. It wasn't. I mean, we were just silly and surreal, but the sub editors didn't always get our sense of humour, and would sometimes read stuff into it that wasn't there. And the more they did that, the more we saw it as a challenge to get kind of slightly dodgy content in a very sort of nudge, wink, wink kind of way. Because it was like, well, you think we're doing this stuff already. Well, okay, well, how about this then? And none of the dodgy stuff ever got taken off because they went over their heads. And that includes the real turn of the worm being sick, which was, my final graphic that I did for Teletext. And it was literally, because I thought, I've got to do something memorable. Well, okay, let's have an ejaculated penis and say it's Turn of the Worm, but they're never going to pass it. I'll put it on the page and let's just see what happens. They're not going to say yes to this. This is going to be the one that they go no. But I just thought I'll chance my arm because let's face it. What are they going to do? Fire me? It's like I've quit already. So I did it, and then it went out. This big purple member with white vomit splashed all over the screen.
Yes, he looked like he drank too much milk, if I remember.
Yes,
my
they'd had a few,
of it,
but, too many White Russians, so to speak.
Yeah, certainly. That's one way of doing it, that's for sure. So it's amazing that it was done on a format that was never really meant to be archived, and yet with technology, your work is now coming back onto the internet, and it's it's really because your work with Steve's and Tim's was so memorable that people sought it out. And I know that there are people like on the Super Page 58 that have been archiving a lot of your stuff and got the ball rolling for a lot of other people. So how do you feel when you see other people find your work and be dead pleased about archiving it?
Well, on the one hand, it's brilliant because I thought all that stuff was gone forever. It was 10 years of my life writing that, and I never thought I'd see any of that again. And so from that point of view, and of course it's incredibly flattering that people want to archive it, that they think it's worth archiving and worth preserving. But at the same time, I sometimes look at it and I kind of go, maybe it was better off left to the memory and the rose-tinted spectacles. And that maybe it wasn't. I was a young man, and I think I'm a better writer now than I was then, and I think I'm a funnier writer. And I sometimes look at it and cringe, and then some of it hasn't aged well. It was a different time, and there are bits and pieces that I kind of go, oh God, no, I wouldn't write that now. That might not be seen as politically correct. I'm yet to be cancelled, but I hope people understand that it was 30 years ago. But broadly, I'm proud of what we did. For whatever reason, Digitiser endured, and Digitiser is something that people remember fondly. I actually, funny enough, I don't ever search for my name online, and I did last week, and I can't remember the reason why I did it. I was looking for something specific, and I can't remember what, and I found a tweet that someone had done who he had called me an absolute shithouse because I had said something years ago. Basically, he described me as his childhood hero and what a disappointment I was. This was on Twitter. An absolute shit of a human being because I'd made some comment back when that Nazi got punched years ago about how I was uncomfortable with everyone kind of whooping and clapping and going, yeah, we should all go and punch Nazis. I'm not against punching Nazis if they deserve it. If you're going to punch anyone, punch a Nazi. But there was something about it at the time that I just found a bit distasteful. I can't remember what it was. I've forgotten about it. It was like 6 years ago or something like that. Anyway, this guy was basically, shitting on my name, saying that, Mr Biffo thinks it's all right to punch Nazis. They were his words. His extreme kind of distortion of what I'd actually said. And yet he was still enough of a fan that he'd stolen some Teletext art that I'd done recently for his Twitter banner and his profile picture. And I did point this out to him and said, I think you slightly distorted what I said, but hey, you're still enough of a fan to steal my artwork, so I consider that a win. Anyway, I thought I'd just throw that out there. Yeah, I mean, I generally stay off of getting involved in any kind of internet sort of discourse on anything. I mean, I've had a few pops at Elon Musk recently, but even that I've just given up with, because you just, especially on social media, you can't. It's not the place to have any kind of reasoned debate about anything. It's no point. So I stay away from all that. I'm not advocating punching or not punching Nazis one way or another. Not anymore.
So you mentioned your writing. Did you go on and do any more writing for any other projects at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I do now. I mean, I kind of, after I left Teletext, while I was still writing Digitiser from home, that was my goal, was to sort of get into writing for TV, which it took 5 years or so, but I did, and then that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years, something like that, on and off. Mostly on. I've done all right. I've had a few series produced of my own. I've had some BAFTA nominations, won a Royal Television Society Award and things. So yeah, I mean, I've done EastEnders, Sooty, My Parents Are Aliens, 4 O'Clock Club, you name it, really. Yeah. I mean, like most things, it got hit by COVID, most industries, and TV took longer to recover than most. So it's been a interesting couple of years, but it finally seems to be green shoots on the horizon, thank God. But yeah, I mean, that's it. I don't consider myself a graphic designer or anything like that at all. I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm a screenwriter now, and have been for almost half my life. Yet it's still always going to be Digitiser that I'm remembered for by most people. Ironically, it's my Sergeant Pepper. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll always be that bloke from Teletext. I know that. I'm well aware that as I say, it's my Sergeant Pepper. It'll follow me to the grave. If I'm ever considered notable enough for an obituary, then that'll be the top line.
So about the writing, then, how does the creative process work? I mean, you've written for My Parents Are Aliens, EastEnders, Sooty, and you've done a film or two as well. How does that creative process start? Do you actually just sit at a table and have a think, or do you go for a walk? Do you have any tricks about that at all?
What I find is the greatest motivator of all is having a mortgage to pay. It's literally that. I've never once suffered from any kind of writer's block. I get days where it doesn't flow, the ideas don't flow, where I'll have a script in front of me and I'll just write the same scene over and over and over and over all day. But the next day will probably be better. I've never had any long, protracted, drawn out spell of the inspiration drying up, and that is, it's not very romantic, and it's not very kind of the sexy sort of version of writing. But the fact of the matter is, I write for a living, and I don't dress it up as anything other than a job. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy it. I'm lucky enough to have a job that I enjoy mostly. Some days it's like pulling teeth, but it's a bit like, to me, the creative aspect of it. It just feels like a skill, in the same way that someone can type, someone can bake, someone can drive a bus. It doesn't. I think writers. And artists in general will often, I'm going to say it, get a bit wanky about their process and their art. But really, writing it's like building a machine. A script is like putting components together in the right order and making sure it all works and functions. It's very mechanical in a lot of ways. When it's going well, it's exhilarating. I find it, like flying when I'm really on a roll with something that I'm writing. But I don't, I do think too many writers, or at least would-be writers, not those that literally are at the coalface and write to pay their bills. I think too many would-be writers sort of see it as, wandering on a windswept moor with a pad and a pencil and chewing on the end of the pencil and kind of, staring off into the middle distance and, dreaming up characters. And it's not. You sit down with a blank page and start to write, and you think of things to write about. That's it. And then you rewrite that thing to make it better. That's, as I say, it's a bit of a, I don't know if that sounds cynical or overly pragmatic, but that's how it works for me. With writing, I've always had ideas as a kid. I was always creative as a kid, but you still have to learn how to write a screenplay. It isn't, you can't just write a stream of consciousness. You do need to understand the mechanics of it and the structure of it and the rules of it, really, because there are rules, same as there are with electrical engineering or plumbing or something like that. You can't just sort of rock up with a spanner at someone's house and kind of go, yeah, I'll fix it, let's have a look. You need to know what you're doing.
I'm very passionate about this, therefore it will work. Yes.
Yeah, let me go and wander on the moor for a bit and think about pipes.
That's going on the poster. But, you have a YouTube channel as well, which goes off in many directions, and that's always worth a look. Do you have any more projects upcoming for your Digitiser YouTube channel?
It's been a weird thing, that Digitiser being on YouTube, because we started out, as you'd expect, sort of doing video games, and then I got bored doing video games. Now it's now I don't know what it is. It's me and my wife who are now funding it, because when lockdown happened, she was sort of nearby and an easily accessible co-host. But she's great, and I love doing it with her. So I hope it captures the spirit of Digitiser without being about video games. It took me a while to be comfortable in front of the camera, and now it's just second nature. But I really enjoy it, and we've got a really passionate audience now, and really an audience largely that a lot of them don't remember Teletext Digitiser or had no experience of it. They just know Digitiser from YouTube, which is bizarre, really, when you think about it, given how big Digi was back in the day. We're a small channel, but as I say, I'd rather be a small cult channel with an audience that is hugely supportive of us than a big channel made up of people who don't really care one way or another. So we're doing, because next year it's the 30th anniversary of Teletext and, of course, Digitiser. So we're celebrating that in a big way. We've got a series coming out called Digi Level 2, which we crowdfunded, which will be dripping with Teletext graphics and Teletext-based animations and all the Digitiser characters. Just started animating that in the last few weeks. And we've got next year to celebrate the 30th anniversary of all things Digitiser, so from 1993 up to 2023. So that means the Teletext era through to YouTube. We've got a big Teletext or Digitiser weekend in July that we're just about to, imminently going to be putting tickets on sale for that, and we're doing 2 nights, or it's going to be kind of 2 days, really, because there's going to be events during the day, so 28th and 29th of July. But I can't say what the events will be yet, because we've literally been exchanging emails with people today about exactly what it's going to be before we put tickets on sale. But I mean, madly, I announced it the other day and sort of said save the date, and people have started booking hotels already. It's like, well, hang on, wait a minute, it's not confirmed yet. I was just saying save the date, calm down. I mean, it will happen. We will be doing it, but whether we'll sell out both nights, I doubt. But it'd be nice if we did, to have a whole bunch of people there who want to celebrate with us. So yeah, that's everything that's on my schedule at the moment. I think, in terms of sort of what's happening Digi YouTube and live wise, but we may do some other things next year with regard to the 30th anniversary. But TBC.
So just finally about Teletext then, what would be your most enduring memory of working at Teletext?
Well, there's probably a few. I mean, working with Tim Moore was special. In fact, I mean, I chatted to him today, funnily enough. You know, we're still in touch. I mean, we just laughed so much until we hurt every day. We were so annoying to the people around us, but we were just enjoying what we were doing, and that motivated us to do it better. And, you know, I don't want to sound arrogant, but, you know, other than perhaps Bamboozle, Digitiser is the sort of one teletext page that has endured. You know, people still remember it. So we were doing something right. People loved it, and it was just that came from Tim and I enjoying writing it. And then I enjoyed writing it for myself after Tim left from home. But those first 4 years where I worked with Tim were really, really special to me. You know, and I made a friend for life who, you know, I'd turn up at work each day and we'd just try to make each other laugh by writing funny things, or I'd do funny graphics, and it was as simple as that. So that was special. And then, you know, the fact that Digitiser was remembered enough that I can be here in, you know, 2022 now as it is, and be contemplating staging a live event, a weekend next year to celebrate, you know, its 30th anniversary. That's just nuts. And, you know, some of the live events that we've done, you know, over the last few years, you know, I did one with you. You know, we've done 2 big shows in Harrow, which was sold out. And the reaction we get and the reception they get, it's such a lovely community that has grown up around it, and quite literally grown up around it in some, you know, respects, because people say, you know, oh, I grew up reading your stuff, and see me as some sort of, I don't know, weird uncle or some substitute parent. I don't know. But there's still a lot of love for it out there, and that is the best thing about the entirety of my association with Digitiser over the last 30 years, is just the love that has endured, and the love people seem to have, and the affection. You know, there are some brilliant people in our little community.
Before we close up, though, I feel that you must plug Sanya's podcast about Marillion as well.
Sanya's podcast about Marillion, brilliant. Yes, I have a podcast that I host with Sanya about Marillion, which is called Biampod, or Between You and Me. You can find it. Look, a lot of the time we don't even talk about Marillion. It's us, so we just go off at tangents and upset our listeners by saying things that are probably a bit near the knuckle. Our upsetting the band, as we have done on multiple occasions, by being deeply disrespectful.
So where can we find your where can we find the Digitiser channel on YouTube?
Just do a search for Digitiser with an S, not a Z. That's often the mistake that people make. Digitiser with an S. British spelling. So just do a search for it on YouTube, and you will find us and the cave of wonders that await.
Yeah, well, that's been absolutely brilliant, Paul. Thanks very much for joining.
You're very welcome, Carl. I've enjoyed it very much. Oh, it's been lovely talking to
you. Paul Rose there, and thanks again to Paul for appearing on this episode of Teletext People. Teletext People is a bite high no limit production, and it's hosted by me, Carl Attrell. If you want to help out, you can do by looking in the programme notes. You can also rate this podcast if you feel inclined to. You can also buy me a coffee in the links. It's a very minimal donation should you feel the inclination to do so. But any money that I do take from this will only go exclusively to paying for the podcast space that I use on Podbean to host these podcasts. So that's all the housekeeping over and done with. And until next time, I'll catch you soon. Keep it blocky.